Hi, everybody. It's Dan Cirucci again, and I'm here with John Robert Carman, or as he is more popularly known and to his many friends, J.R. Carman, who is the head of New Jersey Constitutional Republicans. J.R., how are you today?
Great, Dan. It's great to be with you again. I was able to meet with you earlier in the year in your studio, and it's always good to talk to you. I always keep abreast of what you're doing and appreciate all the hard work you do in socializing conservative and Republican people.
Oh, thank you, JR. And I think if it hadn't been for Facebook, how would so many of us have even met in the first place? Um,
That's true. We there's often we have a lot of negative opinions of Facebook, but in
right.
many ways, Facebook has really it's enabled our organization, the Constitutional New Jersey Constitutional Republicans, really to flourish and to gain a lot of participants. So in many ways, Facebook has been a good thing.
And so I didn't want to mean to signal out Facebook because we could say social media in general, that we're all in
Yes,
touch on social media all the time. Facebook, Twitter, almost all of us now are on Parlor,
Instagram.
which we like, Instagram, and many other vehicles. And I think, Jr., if they ever tried to shut us down, we would always have some vehicle. We would always find some way to be in touch with one another, wouldn't we?
Yes, we would. It's important that we stay that way. And we're actually going to be emphasizing our website more, njconstitutionalrepublicans.org, in
Okay.
2021, anticipating getting more people involved and more exposure through our website. But we'll find a way to get the message out there,
Now
Dan.
tell us in a capsule form what New Jersey Constitutional Republicans is all about, what your aim is here.
Okay, great question. And it's essentially two different objectives. Number one, we believe that the Republican Party needs to be reformed back into the image and intellect and benevolence and prudence and moderation, if you will, of Abraham Lincoln. He was the one who went to the Declaration of Independence to articulate what has become the foundation for policymaking of the Republican Party. The ideas of the laws of nature, nature's God, the self-evident truth that all men are created equal, the God-given unalienable rights of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and the consent of the governed. We consent to be governed as long as the government is assuring and securing our natural rights. So that's the first thing. We believe the Republican Party needs to be clear in its policies, in its platform, and we need to reform the party back to the initial principles of the party. And then what goes along with that is education. We believe that our citizens need to they need to understand the Constitution. They need to understand the principles articulated in the Declaration of Independence, and then the Constitution that protects those very principles. So this
that
is
is
why.
so lacking right now. And I know you guys are going to be launching a Civics 101 course for everybody. It's going to be free, JR.
Well, we're going to, first of all, we're going to have on the third Thursday of each month of 2021, we're going to have a live internet version of the class. And it'll be $10 per class. And then we will have a live meeting at the Ramada Inn on the fourth Thursday of each month. So January 21st will be the first internet civics course, Civics 101. And then on the fourth Thursday, January 28th, we'll be starting our in-person courses. And of course, we'll also have representatives come and speak as we have always had, but they will also be able to participate in a civics course. And that'll be $10 per participant. Of course, we're going to be giving resources and all sorts of different information. This, Dan, will be a legitimate civics course designed to fill the vacuum that's been left with the elimination of civics in our public education and in our higher institutions of education, universities and college. So this will be a legitimate course. I intend on having guests lectures, guest professors come in. So it's going to be a legitimate course, and it'll only be $10 per participant.
So it's a nominal charge, and this is something.
Right. It's right.
Yeah,
Right. And if you complete all 12, there'll be 12 different courses. If you complete the course, you'll get a certificate that you'll be able to proudly display, and you'll be much, much more familiar with the intent that the fathers had for our government and how it is structured. Civics, Dan, really is the study of the rights that a citizen has, and then the responsibility of that citizen in being a good citizen. And the founders thought that it was very important that the people understood the constitutional, the democratic constitutional republican government that they devised in order to preserve it. That means that everyone needs to be involved, not just those who we elect. And of course, there's much more than just voting. We have to be actively participating, much like you have your whole life, just like we have in everyday activity, promoting good government and self-government. And the founders intended people to be participating. And we believe that in the current political situation that we're in this country, it's imperative that people are given this civics education and that they are getting more and more involved. And in turn, they'll be able to make better decisions on who the right representative is. And that representative also needs to have this knowledge of the civics and what it takes to be a good representative, as we do, as we will know what it takes to be a good citizen within our country.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned was the whole idea that our rights do not come from government. They come from God. They are the idea
Right.
of the natural law, which goes, that goes back to England. I believe it goes back to the Magna Carta, which many people may not even know what that was. But
Right.
This is such a cornerstone of our whole concept of Republican government, Republican with a small r, representative government. I mean, JR, it alarms me that many people don't even have any idea of that most basic concept.
Well, you're right. And you mentioned natural law. We would propose, and we'll talk about in the civics course, that natural law really goes back to creation. And of course, the Declaration of Independence talks about the laws of nature, and nature's God. Of course, God is the first legislator. The founders understood that the attributes God identifies and demonstrates really represent the three branches of government. He was the supreme judge, as we read of in the Declaration of Independence. He was also the executor, or through divine providence, which is associated with the executive. And then, of course, the laws of nature, nature's God. He was the legislator. He legislates the laws of fission and the laws of gravity and the laws of motion and all the different laws, the multitude of laws that govern this universe that are very predictable and that we know are he uses to sustain this universe. So it really goes back to the very, very beginning natural law, and that's one of the things that we'll be incorporating. But to your point, it's important that people understand these things and that they understand that rights do come from God, not from Phil Murphy, not from the Democrats, not from even the Republicans. But our rights do come from God. Our founders clearly understood that.
It's the government's job is not to give you those rights or to extend those rights to you. The government's job is to protect and assure those rights, is it not?
It is. And the most important word, Dan, in the Declaration of Independence is to secure these rights, the word secure.
Secure the government liberty.
Right. That's the whole purpose of government, is security. It has everything to do with security. And essentially what it gets down to is the securing of the person and their property. So securing the person means that person needs to live in an environment, a safe environment from which to live and to work and recreate with his family. and then to protect that person's property so that people aren't stealing it or destroying it. And of course, last year we saw with the riots and so forth, the total abrogation of the first responsibility of government. And we still see it, Dan, in Portland, Oregon, and in Seattle, where they have these chop zones where it's absolute anarchy.
Terrible. I
And
mean,
is this really what the country wants?
I watched, and I had to watch it online through citizen journalists that were videotaping it as it was happening in Philadelphia. I watched the destruction of a huge portion of Center City, Philadelphia, the burning of private property, the destruction of private property, the destruction of businesses, the total wanton disregard for the law. And the government basically stood aside and did nothing. And they're abrogating the most basic core responsibility of government. That's what happened. And to me, it was, I couldn't believe that so many people seemed to think nothing of it, and that included the media that didn't even report it for what it actually was. Or am I losing it? Did I miss something?
No, not at all. And you make the point that many people don't understand what the function or the purpose of government is. And Dan, sadly, that includes most of our representatives. I would classify Phil Murphy in that category, as well as many of the other Democrats, and unfortunately, too many Republicans who don't understand the purpose of government, which is the securing of our natural rights. What are our natural rights? Life, number one. So it's to protect the person. Then the liberty. People should be at liberty. You're at liberty to choose where you would like to live and what job you'd like to have and what wife you'd like to pick out or whatever. You have the liberty to do those things. And then the pursuit of happiness, which essentially the founders understood as the acquiring of property. People should have the ability to purchase a mortgage, to buy a home. And the government is responsible for protecting that property. And of course, first the person. So it's very, very simple. It's very fundamental what the responsibilities of government are. And we've seen through the exploitation of this pandemic, Dan, we've seen the basic fundamental purpose of government is not even understood by many citizens, unfortunately.
Do you recall when?
And this is why.
Yeah, you recall when Governor Murphy, one reporter, or I think it was on one of the morning news programs, I'm not sure, questioned him about what he was doing in relation to the Bill of Rights and said, isn't that a violation of the Bill of Rights? And do you recall that Governor Murphy said, I'm afraid that's above my pay grade. The Bill of Rights.
Truly remarkable.
Was above his pay grade.
Truly remarkable.
I was
right, and then of course.
I mean,
go ahead.
Isn't that basic civics? The Bill of Rights, is that basic? I mean, what doesn't that come in like, I don't know, somewhere in junior high school or something? I'm not seriously.
Yeah, well, you're right. Really, in the 19th century, and even in the latter part of the 18th century, people were learning about the Bill of Rights when they were in early grammar school, and of course, after the Civil War, first and second graders were articulating the Gettysburg Address by memory, and of course, how far we have fallen in that regard, but. The fact that Phil Murphy would say that the Bill of Rights is above his pay grade, that has constitutional ramifications because he swears an oath to defend and to support. The exact word is to support the Constitution. That's the state constitution, which is a derivative of the federal constitution.
Right.
And if he doesn't know what the Constitution says or is, which is the mechanism that protects those natural rights articulated in the Declaration of Independence, if he is not aware of the law, which the Constitution is, it's the supreme law, the state, federal
Right.
has the supremacy over it, then what it's almost like hiring somebody to do a job who's ill-equipped and doesn't understand the procedures by which to do that job. That's essentially what it is. And this is a failure of the people, Dan, because they do not have civics education. They don't understand what their rights are.
JR, you mentioned the New Jersey Constitution. I don't know whether people realize this, but the modern New Jersey Constitution, which was established, I think, around 1947 or somewhere,
Right. Yep.
gives the governor of New Jersey enormous, enormous power. In fact, he's probably the most powerful governor in terms of the power that he has under the law of all the 50 states. George Will has called the governor of New Jersey an American Caesar. Okay. And for him not to be aware of what the Constitution allows him or doesn't allow him is really scary when you consider the power he has.
Right. Well, a lot of people do talk about this power. And of course, we actually started talking about the history of the New Jersey Constitution. And it actually incorporated more power in the 1837 version of the Constitution, giving the executive branch more power, and then a little bit more power in 1947. However, what has to be remembered, Dan, is the fact that the very first article, Rights and Privileges, Article 1 says in the Constitution, New Jersey, all persons are by nature free and independent. Very first sentence.
Here
you
go.
Certain natural and so if people are naturally free and independent, nothing that the governor says can inhibit that or can infringe upon that. Now, that doesn't mean that we're naturally free to kill our fellow man or to commit crime.
Right.
We are free to be good citizens and law-abiding citizens, and we're independent, meaning that we're independent from the executive orders or tyranny imposed upon us by a governor. So anything that was done in the New Jersey Constitution still does not abrogate what we read here in Article 1, Rights and Privileges, the very beginning. And it says that the people have the certain natural and inalienable rights, among those which are enjoying and defending life and liberty, and of acquiring, possessing, and protecting property. Now, no law can come along and stop a person from acquiring, possessing, and protecting property. Now, with these executive orders, which again are unconstitutional, there's no mention of executive orders in our Constitution, none, or our federal Constitution for that matter. The executive orders are a product of progressivism, which is something we'll talk about a lot in the course. But nothing the governor can do should affect your ability to acquire, to possess, and to protect your property. Now, what has Phil Murphy done with all of these businesses that he has mandated to shut down? He has clearly abrogated their ability to acquire, possess, and protect their property. I mean, it's that simple. But there's nothing. And what they do, Dan, is they've used two legislative acts, the 1942 Disaster Recovery Act and the 2009 Emergency Powers Act. The Democrats and Phil Murphy have exploited that language, which was basically language empowering the executive or the governor to act in lieu of a terrorist threat or a threat from an adversary. 1942. Germany and Japan declared war on us.
Right.
So the governor, if there were certain cells or sleeper cells, and as well, the 2009 Act or 2005 Act rather of the Emergency Powers Act was in lieu of 9/11. So it would give the governor power to send in authorities or send in a defense in lieu of a domestic or a terrorist threat. Nothing to do with pandemic or diseases. And this is why they use this language of a war and all these different things. And it clearly needs to be distinguished what a war and a crisis is from an emergency. Now we've clearly seen that the legislature needs to address and to roll back the powers that Phil Murphy has used in abrogating what we're reading here in the
They,
Constitution.
they don't seem of a mind to address it. Of course, the legislature is overwhelmingly Democrat, and the few Republican legislators that have spoken out uh, don't seem to have even the support of the entire Republican minority. Now, one of our Republican aspirants for governor, one of the two major, I guess, where there's three announced Republican candidates for governor, two that are really considered heavyweight major, and one of them, Jack Cirucci, has gone as far as to suggest that we may need a constitutional convention, a limited constitutional convention. In New Jersey, how do you feel about a possible constitutional convention for New Jersey? That would be, might even be limited to certain things, but.
Well, considering that we have a Democratic majority, that's the last thing in the world we need to do. We don't need to change the Constitution, Dan. We need to abide by it.
Okay.
Let me give you an example. In Article 2, it says all political power is inherent in the people. Now, we could say that Phil Murphy thinks that all political power is inherent in him, the way he's governed this last year. Government is instituted for the protection, security, and benefit of the people. And nothing can change that.
So if the Republicans regain control, if they elect a Republican governor and we regain control of the state legislature, we won't need that. We won't need to redo anything. All we'll have to do is follow the Constitution.
That's right. And let me give you an Article 3 of the New Jersey Constitution, the distribution of the powers of government. There's one section, one small paragraph, and here's what it says. The powers of the government shall be divided among three distinct branches, the legislative, executive, and judicial. No person or persons belonging to or constituting one branch shall exercise any of the powers properly belonging to either of the others, except as expressly provided in the Constitution. And what I would be afraid of, so number one, we see that this is supposed to be there are three branches of government, which provides the structure of the Constitution, the federal Constitution and the New Jersey Constitution. We see a governor who is working, Dan, he's working autonomously. He's not working with the other legislative branch. He's not working with the Supreme Court branch. Of course, the Supreme Court is another issue that we have to talk about.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, we have a Supreme Court that doesn't seem to want to restrict the governor in any way. We have, right. I think we could safely characterize it as an activist Supreme Court, JR. And we've had an activist Supreme Court as long as I could remember. And it seems to be that way, no matter who's appointing the justices to the Supreme Court, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican. Now, I could argue that Governor Christie tried to rein in the Supreme Court with his appointments, okay? But I don't know. The New Jersey Supreme Court has always, to my recollection, and still is, been one of the most activist courts. Am I crazy? In the country?
No, you're right. And this gets down to, you're making the point, which is really a constitutional crisis in many ways. And that is the dichotomy that exists between the two philosophies of reading and interpreting and incorporating the Constitution. On one hand, you have the fixed structural, textual, originalist, the intent of the founders as they wrote the Constitution. And then you have this living, evolving, evolutionary, Darwinian view of the Constitution, that it has to adapt to the cultural relativity or the geopolitical relativity of the time. And what that living Constitution essentially becomes is a dead Constitution, Dan, because the Constitution therefore no longer protects our natural rights. It can be made to say or do whatever we want. We see that the court in New Jersey for a long time has practiced what we call legislative What they've done is they've taken a view that they are going to have a hands-off approach and let the governor or let the legislature, even though they may pass laws that are unconstitutional, they're going to leave it to the legislative and the executive branch, practicing judicial restraint, if you will, as opposed to judicial review, which is what John Marshall, the first Chief Justice of the United States, talked about. All law should be done, all of the actions by the executive branch and all law made by legislators should be reviewed in lieu of what the language of the Constitution already says, as the words are clearly understood. And this living idea of the Constitution, and ironically enough, we produced a video showing that the most dangerous aspect of Joe Biden being elected as the president is because he is a believer in this living Constitution. And you know, Dan, a lot of people said, well, what did he do for 50 years? Well, he did a lot. And what he did was he was very much a part of the Judicial Committee, the confirmation committees for justices, and he supported Sonia Sotomayor, Stephen Breyer, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, all of these different justices that believe in this living evolutionary view of the Constitution. And I believe that that philosophy has had the greatest impact on the abrogation of the natural rights that our initial Constitution articulated.
The greatest impact in diminishing our God-given rights.
Yes.
And increasingly setting them aside. For example, where did the New Jersey Supreme Court get the authority to basically legislate, which is what they seem to have done, how much money school districts get, according to some crazy formula that had to do with God knows what? And where did they get the authority to require communities to have built or set aside so much low-income housing? And that's just two of the enormous things that they brought about that infringed upon people's rights.
Right. It was all based on the interpretation of a adequate and fair, adequate education. The exact language of the Constitution, which I would have to look up again, in talking about the government's responsibility in education. It was made up, it was viewed, and it was ruled upon by justices that believe in a living, evolving view of the Constitution, and not in lieu of protecting the natural rights of the citizens first, which is what the Constitution clearly shows us in the very first article of the Constitution, and in Article 3. The Supreme Court, or the New Jersey Supreme Court, is one branch of three that all are supposed to be working equally together. And they're supposed to be checking each other and formulating the system of checks and balances and the separation of powers, and to stay within the enumerated responsibilities that they have. You talked about the fact that the New Jersey Constitution empowers the executive or the governor branch, but yet we've seen that nothing he can do can abrogate the language of the Constitution. Everything is subordinate to the Constitution. The Constitution holds the supremacy over any legislative act, over any executive order. And when we get away from the structure of the Constitution, which is what the idea of a living Constitution essentially does, it makes it a dead Constitution. And it's dead in respect that it is there to protect our rights. It no longer does. Now the government is dictating, and we've seen this with the exploitation of the CCP. That's precisely what we've seen happen. And what has to happen, Dan, to fix that is that we need Republican legislators to be elected so that they can put legislation forth that will restrict and clearly define what a war is and what a crisis is and what a state of emergency is, so that this cannot be ever exploited again to the degree that Phil Murphy has exploited it.
Well, there are a lot of other topics we wanted to cover, JR, but I'm so glad we settled on this, which is a very basic and goes back to your Civics 101 course that the New Jersey Constitutional Republicans will be offering. This
Mhm.
starts the third, what is it, the third Thursday
Right, we'll be on,
in
right, we'll
January
be online, right, we'll
online.
be online. Mhm.
And where can people
Online,
go to access it?
if you can go to our events calendar on our New Jersey Constitutional Republicans group page. You'll be able to find it on the New Jersey Constitutional Republicans page as well. And you'll be
Right,
able to see it on my personal Facebook page, John Robert Carman. And you'll see access to the live online event, which will be at 7 o'clock Thursday, January 21st. It's $10 to be able to get in. And then you're going to want to come, if you're able to come down to the Ramada Inn in Vineland, and we will be having our first in-person course on Thursday, January the 28th, at beginning at 6 o'clock. And I've also
great.
been to, and we're also going to be having candidates. I believe we'll be having our gubernatorial candidates joining us in helping to promote and support this endeavor. But we believe it's essential that we get this civics education out there for people, and
Well,
to
I hope a lot of people take advantage of it. I'm certainly looking forward to it, JR, and it was so nice chatting with you today. And I hope we get the chance to do it again. I'm sure we will as you move along with this program. But folks, I got to tell you, the work that this man and his group are doing is so important to each and every individual that wants to live in a free society, to everybody that cares about their rights and responsibilities in a democratic republic, which is what we live under. Okay. And please go to New Jersey Constitutional Republicans, learn, get involved, and find out what we're facing here in New Jersey, because our rights are being eroded as I speak.
no question. No
Okay.
question, Dan. No
I don't know what
question.
else to say.
Well, there's no question about that. The founders intended an engaged citizenry involved. We talk about, you've heard the story a million times. The young Philadelphia socialite asked Dr. Benjamin Franklin, what type of government are you devising during the constitutional process? And he said, a republic if you can keep it. And of course, Ronald Reagan made remarks about it's important that every generation has to step up to preserve liberty, because it's inherent in the human nature of people to want to oppress and want to rule and want to impose tyranny on their fellow man. This is part of our human nature. The founders understood that to a much greater degree, Dan, than the current elites and the current academia world and the current politicians of this day. The founders understood something that most people don't understand. And we want to bring that education to the people so that they're able to protect their rights.
Well, thank you again, JR, for being with us today. New Jersey Constitutional Republicans, what a wonderful chat, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you and your family and everyone.
Thank you, Dan. Merry Christmas to you. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And God bless you and your beautiful family.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.